Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 19. I got to hold the microphone. So, the 19th episode. It's pretty impressive that we've done this 19 times, bordering on the big 20.
19 listeners.
Yeah, well, yeah. Yes, one podcast for each listener. That's fantastic. Well, that means the more we do, the more listeners we get by that logic. All right. We're recording today from a field. I don't know if you can see in the background here, a cop just drove by, so hence the field closed, stay off signs are meaningless. Anyway, welcome to No Traps, No Glory. For those who have been missing things, the whole world's in quarantine and no one's really allowed to do anything per se. Texas, actually got my Texas shirt on. Let me just start off by saying big thank you to Jimmy Swaffer to Jimmy Swaffer for bringing this thing up for me and adorning me with this fine attire, especially because Texas is the last bastion of freedom here on earth. But leading into the podcast, I want to kind of hinge off of what we did last time with the 3 life lessons, which I think was very insightful. I believe a lot of people enjoyed the content and the information that we put out, and the fact that everybody was able to learn from various lifters of very high levels. Each lifter had different things to say and different levels of detail and depth that they contributed. And I think there's a lot to be had and a lot to be discovered by that, to apply to your lifting, apply to our life. And especially in this time, in these circumstances, there's very much to be had, very much to learn, because a lot of the recurring trends in terms of patience, persistence, having a goal, setting a focus to achieve that goal is something that's kind of relative to now, because as everybody knows, everyone is not really doing anything, and you're quarantined and not allowed to train, not allowed to work, not allowed to essentially put our efforts toward these goals directly that we normally would. And then granted, there are other ways to go about it, but all the same, it's very difficult to be able to work with the same vigor and the same capacity towards these goals, because we're just simply limited to our interactions, limited to the environments that we have access to. And forgive me for itching my face so much, but the pollens from this tree over here are seemingly attacking me. I'll regret this later.
Corona?
Negative. So you could check out the 3 life lessons at this link here. I don't know. What?
We're not going to have any links.
Can't you put a link on here? Oh.
Maybe.
All right, well, maybe
We'll try.
There's a link somewhere floating around to episode 18. And then also to check out our Instagram, New York Weightlifting Academy, where I posted just about all. I have one more to post. It should be posted by the time this podcast is released, for all of the wonderful lifters who contributed, and want to thank them again for taking the time to do that. So, today's podcast is going to have somewhat of a different perspective and a different discussion of topics than we normally do. Obviously, it's going to try to tie everything in, but I think it's prudent to kind of go in a little bit different direction, just to hopefully provide some insight and understanding as to what's going on in the world and other people's worlds, for that matter. And what I'm going to try to discuss is the effects of the quarantine and the stimulus. The effects of the quarantine and on individuals and small business. So that ties in very much to the 3 life lessons that we discussed, because a lot of the lessons that applied, like I said, there were trends for what everyone had to say. Puros Dimas said patience. A lot of people said you had to work slowly towards a goal, have realization in the long run, be willing to make sacrifices in order to achieve that point. And that relates to a lot of small business, as one like myself, one like just about every other one out there that you may have known. And I know for myself and a lot of gym owners, the situation is very unique, because not necessarily the economic aspect of it. Obviously, it is the economic aspect of it, but it's more or less the contrast that the situation is providing with what we have, essentially the rules we have lived our lives by to achieve to this point. So in order for someone, aside those who, let's say, have maybe come into a business from generations, a lot of businesses either start from the ground up. Let's say, like mine, for example, took what New York Weightlifting Academy was essentially an idea, which is non-tangible, and has become something that's tangible, active, viable, even if a community, even if you want to go that far. So to steal from Peter Thiel's book, I believe, is that how you say it, Peter Thiel? PayPal guy? Thiel. I want to pronounce it correctly. It essentially went from 0 to 1. Went from nothing and took an idea and manifested nothing into something. And that's what a lot of small businesses have done. So let's say most people that are listening to this podcast are active in, let's say, exercising, training, sports, fitness, whatever moniker you want to ascribe to it. And with that, you understand there's a community involved. There's different gyms, people, we are enthusiastic towards all of this. But weightlifting, let's say, relative to a business, is no different. There are many sacrifices made. There are many discomforts you have to go through. There are many growing pains. There are many levels that you have to work through that are much more arduous than, let's say, average life in order to be able to achieve. And the level that you put out is directly reciprocal to what you receive. If you have an idea, again, in weightlifting, I mean, for the most part, the efforts that you put will yield the return that you gain. So, small business, that's everything. If you have somewhat of a viable product that has value, that people look to that value for, and as value as a medium of exchange, you're trading with another person, and that's ultimately how your business grows, by adding more to that. So, small businesses provide a lot of value, but let's just go back for a second too, before we get further into value. And what a business does. One, when you have a business, you're tied to it. It's like a marriage. You're completely locked into it. It's your livelihood. It's your well-being. And not only are you responsible at that point for yourself, but now you have others that are also tied in, you become responsible for as well. And what that does is that increases the overall viability, increases the value, increases the worth and the reach of that business. So ultimately it takes something and enhances it more, because now the more lives you can affect positively, the more exchange and interactions you have with other individuals, and the more you can facilitate with those individuals, the better that business is going to provide services for people. And ultimately services, I mean, Mr. Producer, correct me if I'm wrong, but services are an exchange of value from one person to the next. I have something that you value, and you value, or wait, hold on, am I saying that wrong? All right, I have something that you value, and you have something that I value. And when we meet in the middle to exchange equal value of what we have to offer to one another, that is when the services and trade therefore takes place, correct?
I value the service more than you charge.
Okay,
and
that
you value the money.
Am I allowed to do that?
More than you do, than it costs
correct.
you to provide it. So.
That's it. That's much better. So we find, the better way to say it. Side note, we're sponsored by Kostritzer today, just like last episode. But
when's that check coming?
I don't think yet.
Speaking of exchange of value, or not so.
Yes, but okay. So as Mr. Producer said, to correct me, you have something. Wait, I have something. What? Lesser value? Hold on. I have something of more value to you. I have something that's more valuable to you than it is to me, and vice versa. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. The exchange occurs when the medium of exchange is worth less to the individual than the exchange itself. Is that a good phrase?
Yeah,
it's pretty good.
We both walk away happy.
Yes, we do. Hopefully I didn't hit the volume. That's good. We've been having volume trouble, a lot of technical troubles here. But anyway, now I'm digressing. So, what we value, what we exchange with one another. So for a small business, that's a lot. Now, because we have that value, it means that, especially something like myself in a service industry, we're providing service. So we need to continually operate in order to be able to continue that exchange and continue the viability of the business. And having that ultimately is predicated upon the freedom to do so. And what's important about the freedom to do so is that it allows us to operate within our own rational interest to do so, in dealing with other rational actors that are going to be exchanged, so that way we can continue that exchange. So hopefully I'm not losing everybody with this, because I'm getting somewhere. without that freedom, we have nothing. And ultimately, there's nothing to be exchanged. And then when you lose freedom, freedom can almost be lost forever, which is not a good thing. So now that we've established that basic premise of what small business is, or what business is in a medium of exchange, there are thousands upon thousands of businesses across the nation. Let's just say thousands of gyms too. And unfortunately, I've heard that a bunch of them are closing down, or many gyms are closing down rather. Permanently, yes. Now, many times as a business owner, you have to be adaptive. You have to be adaptive to your clientele. You have to be able to navigate the obstacles that come ahead of you in order to be able to continually provide a good environment, improve upon the environment, and continually make changes to where you're gradually growing further because you're making positive changes. And going back to the word freedom, you're uninhibited from doing so. You have to be, but you have to be more creative. You have to be thoughtful. You have to really have an active mind in order to be able to do that. So that way you can be proactive to continue the business moving forward. This is essentially most everything in a private sector, and private sector works. I mean, ultimately, if a private company the private company has consequence. If they don't take the proper steps, they either fall back, they lose revenue, or they even go out of business. And that's why private companies have to continually be doing some sort of work to change, do something that makes people continue to want to work through them. So in a circumstance like this, where we are quarantined, where small business is limited, that becomes very precarious and very dangerous for small businesses, because now you're basically you're basically tying the business owner's hands behind their back and throwing them into water, expecting them to swim, while at the same time you're taking their feet and you're binding their feet as well. So there's really nothing. The situation makes it very difficult to do. Obviously, and I'll say thank you again to everybody who's been very supportive and helpful of the gym, because it goes to show that the value is provided, and we can have equal the exchange of values that we provide to one another in order to be able to continue to do things that we enjoy. And I appreciate that very much. What a wonderful group of people we have, Mr. Producer, yourself included. I thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
But in this instance where freedom is being limited, it's dangerous now, because I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but this again comes to awareness. So small businesses were offered through the Federal Stimulus Act, the CARES Act, that they would get $10,000, which could be used $10,000 as a loan, which could be used as a grant, or be considered a grant, if used to pay for all rents, utilities, and expenses. Now, the way it was supposed to work was, as a small business, you apply, then you get accepted, and within 3 days you were supposed to have the deposit of the $10,000 from the Treasury. So halfway through, the government found that it was overwhelming response. Then they changed the protocol and said, okay, it's up to $10,000 that you can get. Then it took a little bit longer, and they said, now it's going to be $1,000 per employee that you can get. So many small businesses, let's say that had maybe 1, 2, 3 employees, were only going to get essentially $1,000 to however much per business, if they could validate that employee. If it was a part-time employee or a contractor, they don't. So as I know, many gyms that applied for this were only getting $1,000. Now, I don't know about you guys, but $1,000 is nice in the real world, but in a time where there's no income coming in from anything, $1,000 is about as useful as this pad that I have here to pay for anything, because the world actually costs things.
Especially in New York.
Yeah, especially in New York. That's a good one. The taxes are crazy. So that's a consideration. And ultimately what I've learned a lot from this, and what I want to get across to everybody, is that, and this is what I've said to a lot of people too, I'm trying not to, I don't want to make this like a really political bent, because obviously no one cares to listen to politics, but a consideration that, let's say, take your weightlifting career. You put in all the effort to your weightlifting career, you work hard, you cut weight to make competitions, you put in years, tons of painful training sessions where you just hate yourself, and then you go home and you hate yourself, and then just to have that one moment to where you actually do fairly well, only to go back to the whole cycle again. But you go through all of this, and then in the end, you get an outside arbitrating force telling you no, that your results, they don't count, or they strip your results from you. That's exactly the situation that's happening now. And how that relates again to small business is the fact that let me go back a little bit further. So I went to school for history originally, have a history degree and such. And most people, they like to argue the current time, what's exactly happening and such. But throughout history, you'll always find trends. Human nature and human interaction is always been the same. There's always trends of ups, there's trends of downs. There's cycles where people become overwhelmed with themselves, or the masses get tired of others. There's always going to be current trends that you can look through and apply to current times. And at this point, I'm going to say that government response in total, I'm not saying Trump, I'm not saying Cuomo, I'm not blaming one person to the next. It's the entity of government that is proving to be very deleterious to the well-being of individuals and individual liberty. And that goes completely contrast to values that to the values everyone applies to themselves as a weightlifter. And I think it's important to realize that, because as a weightlifter, you value yourself. You value the effort you put in. You value your coach. You value the gym. And as a result of that, you work hard to make sacrifices or exchanges, even trade-offs, for the results that you want, whatever it may be, on the platform, psychologically, physically, whatever these may be. These are what you work towards. And when an outside source or an outside actor limits that, as in this instance, it goes to show that, and especially too in the government in this instance, that there's no care or concern for you as the individual. And that historically is very alarming and very disconcerting, because one, small business is the backbone of the entire country, but at the same time, if the small business and the backbone of the country is not being addressed as it needs to be, or even just being prohibited from what it needs to be doing, then you're looking for your own demise. But the demise is coming from an actor who doesn't care about your demise, if that makes sense. So now, not to just completely go right into demonizing the government, because obviously the intention and the interest is to save lives and protect people and to really mitigate the dangers of the unknown, okay? So that's a nice thing. Obviously, they're looking out for individuals' well-being, but what's being lost in that is someone's volitional choice. The idea of someone to be able to say, I am the arbiter of my own fate and my own life, and with that, I can make a choice that best suits me to be able to live as I see fit. And again, this applies to gyms, because as the virus has gone on and new statistics come out, we're at a point, I personally believe we're at a point now to where you're going to see, let me shut the microphone accordingly, where you're going to see the virus is starting to go down, a crossing of the graph, if you will, where now the damage of the virus is going to decrease, but the economic damage is going to increase. And personally, especially for most people that we interact with, and as people have learned through weightlifting, obviously you have to be patient to a point, but there comes a point where you have to be able to make the decision on your own and allow people to begin to navigate their own lives as they need to and as they feel comfortable to, in order to be able to get things moving and be able to get back to, let's say, a somewhat norm, if you will. Because one, individual choice is tantamount. That should be over anything. Most people are rational actors, and most business owners are going to make proper decisions to ensure the safety of their clientele and their employees, as well as themselves, and the integrity of the business in the process. And most people are not going to be inconsiderate, especially knowing the damage that they can do. And for small business in the country, that's something that is most important right now, because the sooner small businesses can get acting, get moving, get operating again, the mitigation of the damage will be hopefully greater. but the damage is still going to have been done. I mean, it's unfortunate to hear so many people that may have gone out of business, but we need to consider that ultimately the freedom of our action and limitation of the government is a very important thing, because at the point now where we are, and if you look back historically, at any time where there was a major crisis or a major conflict, there's always been an incredible restriction of individual liberties and individual freedom. Let's say after 9/11, you had the Patriot Act, which is an incredible intrusion into people's safety, or lives, if you want to say. Safety too, I'd say. If you want to go back to World War I, the income tax, when that was posed by Woodrow Wilson. And then you could go on to cite examples forever, but at every point where there was a major conflict, there's been a trade-off. People have always been willing to trade safety for security at the expense of their liberty. And that stems from a Ben Franklin quote, but that is the most dangerous thing that individuals can do, because you never get it back. So I want just get this message out, and hopefully this helps with small business, gives people a different perspective. I mean, for those who either have not stopped working or such, or just collecting unemployment or anything, I mean, there's a whole different avenue, there's a whole different perspective. And like I was saying with someone earlier today, is that I wouldn't be surprised if you see 35% of the economy gone or dead by the summer, and that comes from small business losses. So trying to give people food for thought, trying not to be too verbose here, but that's what I got for now. So for the time being, stay safe, take vitamin C, and hopefully we'll see you. Bugs everywhere. Hopefully see you next time for episode 20. We got to do something big for episode 20. It's a milestone.
Get a 20th listener would be good.
Oh, okay. 20th listener. You're out there somewhere. We're hunting for you. Okay. So long.